Here we go, guys. Welcome back to my Facebook Live. For those who joined me yesterday, I want to thank you so much for participating in the broadcast and giving me some lovely feedback. I really appreciate that. I'm sorry that I made a bit of a boo-boo in terms of where I was broadcasting from. I ended up broadcasting from my personal page instead of my personal training kind of business page, but I think I seem to have that right today. So yay for me, I'm already making progress. Now today's topic I think is incredibly pertinent because my whole goal in doing these Facebook Live videos is to help people as much as possible to navigate these very, very stressful and uncertain times with the coronavirus pandemic that is affecting every single person on the planet, more or less. And my feeling, having worked in this health space for 17 years with my private practice and having worked in the arena of exercise and education for over 30 years at this stage, is that the biggest issue facing everybody at this point in time is stress, and how to manage the stress that a virus like this and a pandemic like this brings up for everybody. Now stress is not a very I suppose exciting topic. You know, I was thinking of what song could I sing, and I was thinking about let's talk about stress, baby, let's talk about you and me. And like, okay, it's not as exciting as sex, but I'm going to try and make it as enlightening and enriching as possible so that you'll be able to take some action steps away with you today and feel empowered and feel more confident moving forward and navigating the days and weeks ahead. Now, what is stress? Stress was defined by a guy who really was the forerunner in this whole field of research. His name was Hans Selye, and he defined stress, I've written it on my little board, as the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. So non-specific to any demand for change. So bottom line, any stimulus that your body is exposed to, either internally or externally from the environment, the body is going to have to respond to that in one way or another. Some of these responses happen so automatically that we don't even notice them, and some of them are much more obvious. Let's say a car is speeding by, comes close to me, my body reflexively jumps out of the way. Yeah, I'm going to notice that. Let's say I eat a food that maybe is not so fantastic for my body and it causes my blood sugar to spike quite dramatically. Depending on my level of body awareness, I mightn't even notice that. And that's actually creating a stress for my body in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. So let's take a look at the many, many different kinds of stress that there are, because many people, when they think of stress, they simply think of, oh my God, it is psychological stress, mental and emotional stress. That's what most people think stress is. It's worry, it's anxiety, it's stressing me, it's driving my head crazy. But stress is so much more than that. It includes psychological stress, this mental and emotional field, but it also includes multiple other fields. And when you see how this whole picture fits together, you'll begin to realize that you've got way more power over stress than you realize. And you'll also realize that stress is not the bad guy that it has been painted out to be. It's not all bad. So let's look at some of the different categories of stress. Now this isn't all inclusive, I could add more. I modeled this on one of my mentors' stress funnels. I studied for many years with a guy called Paul Chek, and that's where I did my holistic lifestyle coaching training. Several years ago I started working with him in 2004 and did multiple educations in corrective exercise and nutrition and lifestyle coaching. So this model comes from Paul Chek. So he looks at stress as a funnel, and that funnel, all of the different types of stress are poured into the funnel. So let's just see, can we see it on the camera a little bit better there? So one example would be physical stress. So let's say you're a manual laborer, you're lifting heavy objects all day long. That is an example of physical stress. Working out, doing high resistance training is also an example of physical stress. And here immediately we begin to realize, hang on a second, I thought stress was bad, but now you're telling me that exercise and lifting weights is a form of stress. Well, stress can be good. This is eustress, and stress can be bad. This would be distress, right? So stress can be good or it can be bad depending on multiple factors: the dose, the timing, the frequency, whether there is enough recovery from the stress. So this is a very, very powerful piece of information. So when it comes to, for example, the physical stress of exercise, if I exercise with a reasonable amount of frequency, do the right dose, the right amount, based on my experience, based on my ability to recover, that exercise is a stress in the short term, but as I recover, it actually makes me stronger, it makes me fitter, it makes me healthier, and it actually boosts my immune system. So there's a classic example of not all stress is bad stress. Now, another example of stress would be chemical stress. A very classic example of chemical stress would be all of the toxins and the poisons that we are exposed to in the world today. We're talking about things like PCBs, we're talking about phthalates found in plastics, we're talking about emissions, fuel emissions, we're talking about the mass industrial waste from the modern era. A lot of these substances are very highly toxic to our bodies. We're talking about the high levels of mercury found in seafood, and the high levels of heavy metals and other poisons found in all sorts of things like personal care items down to your lipstick, and many, many other sources. So this is an example of chemicals which create a lot of stress in the body. Now, example of chemicals that would create good stress would be many plants create chemicals to protect themselves from being eaten. And these substances, if eaten in small quantities by humans, can create what's known as a hermetic response in the body. It kind of provokes the body a little bit and irritates the body a little bit, and then the body actually becomes more resilient as a result. Now, if a person is already got a very weakened digestive system, very poor digestive fire, they're very run down, even that small amount of hermetic stressor in the plant can give them a terrible response to the food, and hence we're having a backlash now in this modern era against plants. And it's not so much that plants are bad per se, it's that our systems have become so unresilient because we are bombarded with so many stressors that a little bit itty bitty stressor in a plant, all of a sudden we're in overwhelm. So we will see a crisscrossing effect of a stressor in one area predisposing us to being less resilient in another area. Now, electromagnetic stress, this is another massive one in our modern era. Electromagnetic stress is coming from all of the radiation from the electrical items in our home, from the light bulbs, from the TV set, from the computer screen, from the tablet, from the Wi-Fi box. We are being bombarded left, right and centre. We're in, some people call it an electromagnetic shitstorm, and I think really that is a very appropriate term, because we are swimming in a sea of electronics, and our bodies are actually electromagnetic entities as well. So you bring one electromagnetic field like the body into another electromagnetic field, and those fields are going to affect one another. So what many people are saying now is that this is creating an awful lot of damage to the human body, and we're trying to reduce our exposure to these electromagnetic stressors. Things like taking out fluorescent light bulbs and putting in different types of light bulbs would be a way of reducing it. Things like turning off your Wi-Fi box at night, and another way of reducing these things. Now I have a whole raft of stuff on that written in my book, and there's a lot of information available out there on how to reduce electromagnetic stress. Now the next one here, mental and emotional. This is the biggest whopper for so many people. The ongoing worries, the mental and emotional worries, the depression, the anxiety, the fear. And yesterday I talked about fear being a biological response of the human body to instigate some sort of a survival response. Fear is not bad as long as you face it in the moment. I love the, I think it's called an acronym, FEAR. Face everything and relax. If we relax and we feel the fear and we allow the body to have its normal response to it and we take action in the moment, that fear will dissipate and release, and hopefully at that stage we will have taken the appropriate action to save ourselves. But the problem is a lot of us get into a mode of worry and anxiety, which is basically a phenomenon of the thinking mind. Your mind can either be a friend or a foe. So the part of the mind that doesn't work out so well for us has been described as the thinking mind by an Indian teacher called Ramesh Balsekar. I kind of like his teachings a lot because they're very, very practical. And he says, well, you've got two parts of the mind: the thinking mind, which is all of the psychological way of viewing things, and this is through the lens of all of our conditioning and past experience. And then we have the working mind, which is a very rational mind, a calm mind, and a higher order of thinking. And if we are to work from this working, rational, calm, centered mind, then we can have peace and we can have harmony in our lives. But if we let ourselves get hijacked by this thinking mind, then the only possibility is a lot of suffering and a lot of stress. Now, this one, nutritional stress. Food can be a blessing, and it can heal and nourish your body, or it can be very, very deleterious to your body. If you're eating a diet that is, ancestral based, if we look back to what our ancestors used to eat in the caveman times, or even go back to what our great grandparents used to eat, they weren't having drive-throughs from Supermax, they weren't eating things out of packages, they weren't eating large quantities of refined sugar. So if we go back just to our great grandparents, immediately we're going to see a very different scenario. They were eating unprocessed, unrefined foods, eating meat, eating fish, eating dairy for the most part, eating vegetables, and nothing processed. If we just did that alone and eliminated processed foods, we would wipe out most of the healthcare bills on the planet straight away. Right? Nutrition, a massive topic. I might do a video on that another day, but it's so vast. So nutrition can either be highly stressful or highly healing. It's just that simple. All things can be used to good or bad. And this next one, I just popped it in because of what's going on right now: viral, bacterial, infectious type of diseases. These are in the environment. They're actually in our bodies all of the time. And this is an incredibly important point to note. Now, we know that this coronavirus is a novel virus. It's new. The planet hasn't seen it before. But what we also know is that if somebody, research scientists have done tons of work on things like immune system, tons of work on what kind of viruses or bacteria are already in the body. And one of the things that they did was they did swabs of the throats of loads of different people, and they found over 90% of them had this streptococcus virus already in the throat, but the vast majority of people, it wasn't a bother on them. And why was that? Oh, because they already had healthy immune systems. So we have a raft of viruses and bacterium in our body. Our body is actually it's far more bacterial cells than actual human cells. We're more bacterial than human. But we don't get sick for the most part because our innate immune system is able to keep this ecosystem of our body in check. So this is an incredibly important piece of information, possibly the most important piece of information we could have in this whole corona epidemic, because a lot of people are living in fear of the virus, and we see how easily it spread. But the greatest point of power that you have, apart from the obvious and very practical stuff of washing hands very frequently and social distancing to reduce the spread of the disease, and really we're reducing the spread of the disease essentially to protect the most vulnerable members of society that have got an impaired immune system. Because if you have a healthy immune system, your body is going to be able to handle this situation, this virus and many other viruses without much difficulty. Many people get the virus and they'll have almost no symptoms. And that's because their immune system is designed. The immune system of the human body is so intelligent, it's designed to handle stuff like this, right? So just knowing that, and knowing that there is a massive correlation or association between the levels of stress in our lives and the power of our immune system is incredibly important. So that's why I said yesterday that my feeling is that the most important thing that we can do in this, as this process unfolds, is to reduce the amount of stress in our lives. Because when we reduce the stress in our lives, the immune system becomes much, much more robust. Now, these are just some of the examples of the stressors we are exposed to in our daily life. Now, let's take a look at, I would like to go through one of the questionnaires I put in my book, Cracking the Mind Body Code, to see how much of a stress response are you in. Your stress response is governed by, I suppose, 3 major wings. We used to think it was 2 wings, just sympathetic and parasympathetic, and now due to the work of Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory, we realize there's actually 3 primary wings of your autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system being that automatic way the nervous system responds to various stimuli. So the green zone, the healthiest possible nervous system you can function from, is the ventral aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system. This is, we're energized, we're relaxed, we are engaging socially and interacting with people, and we're motivated and we're interacting, and we have a full function of what's known as the frontal lobe of our brain. This is also known as executive function. You've got drive, you've got motivation, and you're feeling like interacting and you enjoy interacting. This is a nervous system that's in optimal health. Now, let's just say with this coronavirus straight away, that system has been impaired largely due to legislation. We're not supposed to interact with people socially. We're meant to keep a distance from people. We're only meant to be around family members or whoever is in our household. And you could be like me, you could be living on your own in a household. So therefore, that normal social engagement is severely impaired. And immediately that happens, that has the potential to push us into an orange state. So the orange state would be the sympathetic state, the sympathetic side of the nervous system. This is the fight or flight side of the nervous system. It's hyper arousal. It's, oh my God, what am I going to do? It's increased blood pressure. It's increased heart rate. It's sweaty palms. It's fidgetiness. It's, oh my God, I can't sit down and relax. This is a very aroused nervous system. So a lot of people in the world right now are in this sympathetic state of over arousal. They're like a hen on a hot griddle. They don't know what to do because they're over aroused from the bombardment from the media and the mental and emotional stimulus that is causing them to live in a thinking mind, over analyzing, over assessing, over projecting fear and worry and anxiety into what might happen in the future. Now the third state, which is the red zone, this is the most stressed zone we could possibly be in. This is another aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system, but this is the dorsal aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system, or the vagus nerve. And this is where the body goes into shutdown. So if you ever got a terrible fright and you fainted, that's an example of the body going into this dorsal aspect of the vagus nerve. And the person could freeze, right? You might physically freeze, you might faint, or you might just become immobilized in terms of, oh my God, I don't want to leave my home, I'm so scared. So some people who have had extreme trauma in their lives, they literally end up as little house mouses or mice. They're shut down, they're depressed, they are withdrawn, they resist social engagement because they are in this most repressed, most stressed aspect of that the nervous system, that the autonomic nervous system can demonstrate. And in reality, it's almost like this shutdown. In terms of people having to isolate, it's almost like a forced, dorsal vagal state on people in many respects. So I'm going to make some comments about that later on. Now, I'm not saying that what the government is doing is wrong. I feel that what they're doing is 100% correct to protect the most vulnerable members of society, and hopefully if we all, knuckle down and comply with these guidelines, that we'll be able to help our loved ones get through this more swiftly. But in essence, it's almost like an imposed dorsal vagal state, the vagus nerve being the primary nerve that regulates this stress response, this acute stress response. So that's a little look at the different types of stress, a little look at the different branches of the nervous system in terms of how the branches of the autonomic nervous system responds to stress, the optimal one being the ventral vagus nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, the green light, the executive function, the high social engagement. That's the best. The alarm bell going off, we're in sympathetic, we're in fight or flight, we're running off to the supermarket buying 50 rolls of toilet roll, that's an example of the sympathetic state. And then the extreme, where the body says, holy shit man, I can't cope with this at all, the body shuts down, you might faint, you might be frozen, you might be not able to do anything. I gave an example yesterday of a woman in a blog, and she said, oh my god, all my friends are exercising, and she says, I don't even feel like I can move. She's probably very much in dorsal vagus state. She's in an extreme shutdown state because she has gone, the level of stress has become so overwhelming that was the body's only option, was to kind of check out, right? Okay, so how stressed are you right now? And stress, remember, is it can be immediate, it can be cumulative, and it can be residual. Those are the three types of stress. Immediate, so people are experiencing stress right now based on what's happening in the world. Cumulative, you have had accumulated all sorts of stress response through your entire life. If you've dealt with them fully in the moment, they will have been resolved. If you haven't, then what do? You actually end up packaging that stress in the cells of your body. And this would create, for example, regions of extreme tightness in the body, muscles that are just totally locked up, hips that are locked up, lower backs that are sore, a shoulder girdle that's hunching and bunching and tight. This is an example of residual stress that has been unresolved. Immediate, cumulative, and residual. Residual, what we have not dealt with from the past. So the stress, we've got to deal with it as best we can on a day-to-day basis. So I often talk to my clients and I say that, dealing with stress is like taking out the garbage. You've got to take out your garbage regularly, because if you don't take out the garbage regularly, it's going to be a very stinky household very soon. We don't take out the garbage just once a year when we go on holidays. We got to take that garbage out, daily or at least weekly. Right? We don't wait for stress reduction just for our, once a year summer vacation. That's not enough. So how stressed are you? Let's take a look. This is a questionnaire that I put in my book, Cracking the Mind-Body Code, which is available on Amazon. And this is one of the questionnaires I put down to see if you're sympathetic dominant. Now, at the time I was writing the book, I was not aware of Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. But this gives us a strong indication if we're in this fight or flight mode, which is the amber zone, the medium alarm bell. So these are just symptoms, and I add to this frequently when I do different posts. Okay, in my experience in working with clients one-to-one for I suppose 17 years now, most individuals who are highly stressed do not even realize that they're stressed, but the body is giving them signals all of the time, letting them know that they are stressed. So one of them, I see this tons with my clients, an inability to lose fat or weight, especially around the belly area, regardless of eating well and exercise. The fat that's located around the belly is related, the belly and the waistline is related to two principal hormones, cortisol, and the second one would be insulin. If you're pumping out tons of stress hormones, the body will store fat there, and if you're pumping out tons of stress hormones, this will create a serious depletion in your ability to regulate blood sugar effectively. This creates a knock-on effect of poor insulin sensitivity. So poor insulin sensitivity leads to fat around the waist and then cortisol around the belly, generating what's known as the cortisol insulin seesaw. So stress derails blood sugar handling. And if you've got poor blood sugar handling, then you will have a terrible time managing insulin, and that's another massive one for body composition changes. And this is one of the reasons why low carb diets have been so, I suppose, popular over the last 2 decades or so. But unfortunately, for some individuals, that's not the whole solution. We're not going to get into that today, but there's just, some of you will already relate to what I'm talking about there. Now, the next one, complaining of fatigue. So you see, if we're pumping out stress hormones all the time, every time we get stressed, there's going to be a neurological response to it in terms of whether we are in this sympathetic mode or whether it's gone so crazy that we're gone into this dorsal vagus nerve mode, which is complete shutdown. So there's going to be the neurological component to the stress, and there's going to be the endocrinological component to the stress, and that's hormone related. So we'll be talking about things like cortisol and adrenaline being the two principal examples of stress hormones. So if you're pumping out stress hormones, in the moment and for a period of time, you're going to feel like you got great energy. So I call stress hormones the crack cocaine of energy production. It's like you knock back a double espresso and all of a sudden, Jesus Christ, man, I got loads of energy. That's the crack cocaine of energy. This is a fake energy. It's not a real energy. You're basically horsewhipping your endocrinological system, and this is not sustainable. Some people will get away with this for several years, and some people with a weird genetic type, I've heard it called maybe the warrior gene. Some people actually thrive on stress and they'll get leaner on stress. My mentor used to talk about this, and their testosterone levels will go up. These people are actually designed to be working in a war zone. They'd make brilliant special ops or secret service people, because they are wired to thrive in a high stress environment. They'll get leaner, their testosterone will go up, and they'll feel fantastic. This is a very, very, very small percentage of the population. Vast majority of the population do not thrive on stress. Some stress in intermittent doses is great because it gives us a stimulus and the body can respond to it to come back better, fitter, stronger. For example, those intermittent doses of exercise throughout the week where you challenge yourself above and beyond, outside of your comfort zone, you rest, you recover, and you come back stronger. That's an example of good stress. But if we've got unrelenting stress and we're producing energy in this, what I call crack cocaine way, this artificial way, then of course we're going to get very, very fatigued, because we're going to be depleted hormonally, and we're going to be depleted. Our nervous system becomes very overstimulated and very, very depleted, because we're meant to be able to, if we're in this sympathetic state, it's meant to be just for short, brief periods, and we're meant to go back to that parasympathetic state, particularly that ventral aspect of the vagus nerve, which is one aspect of the parasympathetic state. We're meant to be able to go back there and spend the bulk of our day in that state, and small intermittent bouts of stress. But for most people, the stress is relentless. The deadlines are relentless. The traffic jams are relentless. The demands from the boss are relentless. The arguments with the family and spouse are relentless. The worry and anxiety, it's just a constant overstimulation. So most people spend the bulk of their lives in this sympathetic state, and the only possibility there is to be pumping out stress hormones to beat the band. This is not an organic method of energy production, it's an emergency method. It's meant to be for short, brief periods, but if it's relentless and chronic, it becomes something that wipes the body out, and then there's tons of consequences. One of the consequences is belly fat, weight you can't shift, especially on the belly and waist. Number 3, joint pain, with backache being the most common. So if you've got joint problems, the body, in order to go into a state of repair, it has to shift into this parasympathetic state, this ventral aspect of the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve has to be stimulated in this parasympathetic way, and when that happens, the parasympathetic state is also known as the rest, digest, repair and detoxify state. So rest, digest, repair, detoxify. If you're in the fight or flight zone, you cannot rest, digest, repair and detoxify. I can have a light switch on, or I can have the light switch off. I can't have it on and off at the same time. The traffic light is either red or the traffic light is green, right? I can't go and stop at the same time. So if you're in fight or flight, you cannot repair. You can't repair your joints. Some people will not get repair. I do corrective exercise with people who have back problems, chronic hip pain, knee problem, and some people will never repair those problems. Not that they don't have an amazing exercise program, not that they're being less than diligent with doing their exercises, but because they're in a chronic state of sympathetic dominance. Their lives are go, 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 do, work, 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 action, 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 stimulus, 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 nervous system overload. They cannot repair. And until that penny drops and they start calming down their overstimulated nervous system and balancing their hormones, they will never get rid of their aches and pains. So this is why any system of healing needs to be a holistic one. We are not just like a car where we change a few bolts here, tighten a few bits there, and off we go. We are much more complex than that. So a healthy nervous system is essential in order to heal muscles, bones and joints, because that's what runs those things. Now, number 4, dilated pupils resulting in sensitivity to bright light. These are signs and symptoms that you're in sympathetic dominance, that you're in this fight or flight mode most of the time. Number 5, ongoing worry or anxiety. If you're a person who is worrying and anxious on a daily basis, that means you're overstimulated. Your nervous system is overstimulated, you're in the sympathetic zone. Possible panic attacks. Now, when you go into the panic attack mode, when people have panic attacks, they might even pass out. So they're on the bridge of this ultimate shutdown, which is that dorsal vagal state, which is the absolute red zone. Everything's shutting down. Inability to relax and unwind. So this is a very, very interesting one in this coronavirus time that we find ourselves in. A lot of people now have got a lot of time on their hands, and they're going crazy. They cannot handle boredom. They cannot handle being quiet. Why? Because being in this sympathetic state, as damaging as it is in a chronic way, is highly addicting. When you're in this sympathetic state, this fight or flight state, this go, 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 do state, your body concomitantly is pumping out these stress hormones. It's pumping out cortisol, and if you've been pumping out cortisol for long enough, you can become resistant to cortisol, just like people can become resistant to insulin, right? And then when that happens, your body starts running on adrenaline. And these stress hormones are highly addictive, because what do? These stress hormones numb our pain. So have you ever heard of people becoming addicted to painkillers? I found this fascinating when I heard about it first, and I remember one of the guys on Friends, not that I watched that, but one of the actors on that, he had some terrible injury and he had to take painkillers, which was the right thing to do at the time. But once the injury had recovered, he kept taking the painkillers. Because they created, if you don't take them when you're not in pain, I think people can get high off them, right? So adrenaline and cortisol are pretty much the exact same thing. It's as taking a painkiller when you don't need it. People get high on stress hormones. I've talked about this many, many times. Stress hormones create a numbing out effect, where you can't feel pain. You can't feel physical pain, or you feel less physical pain, but you also can't feel that mental and emotional pain either. You've numbed out to feelings of uncomfortableness. Now, this is again very, very interesting what the coronavirus is delivering to us. The coronavirus is such a massive alarm bell for so many people that the capacity to numb out those deep feelings of uncomfortableness has been reduced very, very significantly. So we can't hide anymore. The coronavirus didn't push feelings of fear and terror in our lives. The coronavirus has just been pointing to the fear and terror that people have been storing in their bodies for their entire lives. Not just our personal fear and terror, but the fear and terror that maybe our parents experienced and didn't resolve, and then they passed it down to us. This, of course, is unwitting. It is not done on purpose. It is not done maliciously. People do the best that they can do based on the information and the education that they have. It's also handed down based on ancestral trauma. When I was researching for my book, I was asking my late father about any major stressors that happened in the family decades ago, in terms of his great grandparents or uncles or whatever, and he was telling me about this black flu that wiped out. It was either 3 or 4 brothers in one family were just killed from this, epidemic of a black flu that just killed, half the blooming members of the family. Now, can you imagine that the level of trauma that would have, created within that family system? Now, back then in the day, they didn't have psychotherapists on speed dial. They didn't have, Facebook Live podcasts where people could talk and discuss about their feelings. So what happened? People buried that pain in their bodies. This affected the genes epigenetically, and these markers of stress were handed down to further generations. This is what happens, right? So we're actually carrying a burden of stress that most people are very, very unaware of how much we're all carrying. This is why we have to be very sensitive and compassionate to others, because we have no idea the level of burden that people are actually dealing with. And as individuals, this stuff is subconscious. It's in our DNA. So we're not just, stress isn't just the daily rough and tumble of life. It's all the stuff we've inherited from our ancestors. It's the stuff that our parents never managed to resolve. And it's the stuff that as little children, because we're so sensitive, we could feel the unrest in our parents. We could feel the deep unresolved trauma in our parents, because that's how sensitive we are as children. And then we make all sorts of conclusions in our minds that there's something wrong with us. So many layers of stress. But anyway, we have the capacity and the resiliency to handle all of it. We absolutely do. And now we have got a tremendous opportunity where we're being forced to slow down. Remember, we're not actually stressed because of the coronavirus. We're stressed because the coronavirus has shone a massive floodlight, a massive spotlight on all of the fear and trauma that's been buried inside of us all, for all of our lives. And it's reached a peak. Not just our stress, as I said, but the stress of all of our forebears. So, next one. Disturbed sleep. So how many people today are on sleeping medications? How many people today have trouble falling asleep? How many people wake up several times in the middle of the night? How many people suffer from waking up early in the morning and not being able to go back to sleep? If sleeping medications are anything to go by, it's a whopping number. This is another huge topic, and I'll probably do another Facebook Live on this topic as well. But disturbed sleep, huge majority of adults have disturbed sleep. What's a good night's sleep? You fall asleep, your head hits the pillow, and you don't wake up until the alarm bell, or you wake up naturally the next morning. That's the only thing that constitutes a good sleep, right? Next one, indigestion. Number of people that have digestive issues, it's maybe 70 to 80% of the population. So if you are in fight or flight mode, can you be in rest and digest mode at the same time? No, we talked about that earlier. The light switch is either off or it's on. The traffic light is either red or it's green. It's not the two of them. It has to be one or the other. If you're in fight or flight mode, you cannot digest. You cannot digest your food. So the vast majority of people with digestive issues, actually, it's a stress response, a runaway stress response that they have no idea that it's going on. They have no idea why, because the stress hormones create a numbing out effect. And people only begin to realize how stressed they are, number one, if they find themselves in a chronic pain situation. I deal with a lot of clients with chronic back pain. Number two, they find themselves with a very serious health condition. Or number three, something happens like is happening now, and the person is tipped over the edge. They're just, something gargantuan happens and it just tips them over the edge, and then the real reality of the amount of stress that's been stored in the body becomes too light. Okay, constipation, similar story. Okay, if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger to save your life, what are you going to do? You got to engage the sphincter muscles in your body. Your bladder and your back passage have to tighten up so that you can create enough intra-abdominal pressure to sprint like hell. So if you're running away to save your life, you cannot relax and defecate at the same time. Alright, so people with constipation, either constipation or diarrhea, again, very, very closely related to high stress response. Sometimes the stress can be so high that the person loses complete control, and this would be correlating again to this dorsal vagal state, the complete shutdown. I was watching the Game of Thrones there several months ago, and I got so many amazing insights from watching that series. But in one part of it, a little guy was about to be, he was in a lineup basically to be executed or killed, and just when the threat had passed and somebody else was picked to be executed, he basically pissed his pants. right? So when we're in such an incredible state of fear, we can lose the most basic function. Now this is why I think this is what I think has caused the toilet roll craziness. Why of all things did people go stockpiling toilet paper? Well, when you're scared shitless, maybe toilet paper could be the most important thing that you could have. If you're so scared that you feel like you're going to lose control of your bowels, maybe that's the exact most important medicine that you'd want to have on hand. Again, this is subconscious. But when we are frightened out of the seat of our pants, when we are scared shitless, that means we're in a massively aroused, a supreme aroused stress response. We've lost control of our most basic functions. We can't even run away. In order to be able to run, you need to be able to tighten up the sphincter muscles of the body. And if you're so scared that you can't run away, you've moved into dorsal vagus, you're in shutdown, you shit yourself, you faint, you lose bladder control. So loads of people in this toilet roll buying epidemic, it's pointing to them, oh my God, I am so stressed. Not only am I not in fight or flight anymore, I've gone to the worst possible case. I've gone to dorsal vagus, which is the complete shutdown. And if people get stuck there, that's a frightening place to be. Okay, depression. Another sign and symptom of high, unrelenting stress levels. High cortisol levels basically castrate or destroy the good neurotransmitters like dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter of motivation, drive. Oh my God, I can do this. I can't wait to start. That's dopamine. Serotonin is, oh my God, I feel fantastic. I feel so satisfied. I had just a delicious meal and I feel all nice and relaxed now. I'm cuddling with my little dog and I'm feeling lovely. I'm out in the sunshine. I can feel the sun on my face. I just feel so happy. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter of happiness. Cortisol wipes out and severely suppresses both dopamine and serotonin. So many people who are depressed, depression again, very complicated topic, but one of the possible reasons for it is running on high stress hormones for weeks, months, maybe even years, and in some cases maybe the whole life of the person. What if you were a child and you grew up in a household with alcoholic parents? Were you in a state of rest, digest, relax and repair there? You were in fight or flight mode probably for most of your childhood. And once you learn that that's the way of being in the world, very, very difficult to break that cycle. It's extremely difficult to break that cycle. You're not even aware in many cases that that's how you've been existing. So you've been running on stress hormones, and as I said, depending on your genetics, it depends on how long it takes for that, for number one, for a person to become aware of that, and number two, for the deleterious effects of it to manifest fully. Remember, some people with warrior genes, a very tiny percent of the population, thrive in stressful environments. That's not most people, right? Okay, so that's depression. Next one, weakened immune system. If you're pumping out stress hormones to beat the band, they are highly immunosuppressive. So that is why my recommendation in this time is to become a master at identifying when you are stressed and relieving stress. Next one, low sex drive. I talked yesterday about erectile dysfunction being one of the signs and symptoms of a root chakra dysfunction. So erectile dysfunction is a canary in the coal mine, and it's a sign that the vascular system isn't working very well, and that's like one of the early warning signs that that person is very likely to be more predisposed to having cardiac problems, cardiac arrest and whatnot. So low sex drive. Your body has two choices in life. You can either make sex hormones or you can make stress hormones. There's a mother material in the body, a mother hormone called pregnenolone. And pregnenolone can go on to produce another substance called DHEA, which is the mother hormone to produce your sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, right? Or that pregnenolone, if we are highly stressed, can be shunted off another metabolic pathway to produce more cortisol. This is known as the pregnenolone steal. So people who are highly stressed, they have to keep making those stress hormones. They will experience this pregnenolone steal, and all of their sex hormones, instead of producing sex hormones, they will be producing stress hormones. So it's basically impossible to feel sexually aroused and sexy and all of these feelings of vitality and virility, and to feel stressed at the same time. So many people with low libido, low sex drive, it's because they just don't have the hormones to make the blooming sex hormones, because they're too busy making stress hormones. So this is a huge majority of the population. Don't feel bad about this. This was the story of my life. My whole life has been leading me to write my book and resolve, all of the challenges I've had in my life, and I've had plenty. I haven't had it cushy. I have had many challenges in my life. So that forced me down a path to say, what the hell is going on here? What the hell is going on here? I had depression as a kid. I wanted to kill myself on numerous occasions. I had high levels of anxiety. I had chronic back problem that had me out of work for a whole year. I had heavy metal toxicity. I had so much stress. It was only years after, when I started to unravel the stress, that I realized, holy shit, I had been living in a stress zone my entire life. And I was exercising like a lunatic in the gym, doing an awful lot of exercise. Why? Because I wanted to keep, subconsciously, I wanted to keep pumping out those stress hormones. I wanted to keep pumping out the cortisol and adrenaline, because at least it was numbing the situation. Because if those stress hormones calmed down and revealed what was hidden underneath it, Jesus Christ, man, I didn't have the apparatus at the time to deal with it. But now, thankfully, I do. Doesn't mean I have it easy, doesn't mean that all my problems are gone, but I have much more awareness and much more tools to handle what is going on. And I know that I am not alone. I know this issue because I've been working with clients for 17 years, that every single client that walks through my door, this issue is going on for them to a greater or lesser degree. Any client who's in pain, it's going on for them. Any client who has excess weight is going on for them. Any client who has particular trouble shifting weight around their belly, it's going on for them. Any client who's got digestive issues, is going on for them. Any client who has got sleep disturbance, sleep problems, is going on for them. So that's like 99.9% of the people I see. Right? Okay, stomach ulcers, another one related to the digestive issues. Cravings for sweets, alcohol, cigarettes or coffee. Now, remember earlier I talked about there being an intimate relationship between cortisol and insulin. So if you've got fat around the belly button, it's very likely that you've got fat around your waistline as well. Because as soon as cortisol is derailed, insulin is also thrown a curveball, and we get this cortisol insulin seesaw. So cortisol derails blood sugar, healthy blood sugar handling. If you eat food and it makes you fall asleep shortly afterwards, or if you eat food and you feel like, oh my God, I've gotten a lift and I'm starting to wake up again, both of those are signs and symptoms that your blood sugar handling is starting on a cascade of dysfunction. Now, diabetes is what I call the last train station on the train ride of blood sugar dysfunction. The first one is hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar. So you start with hypoglycemia, then you can move to hyperglycemia, where the blood sugar is swinging up and down, and then the last stop is where the blood sugar remains elevated all the time. Then you'd be classified as a type 2 diabetic. So cortisol derails blood sugar handling. So if we've got poor blood sugar handling, we will crave foods that tweak that blood sugar. Coffee does it, sweets does it, cigarettes does it. Right? So anytime we're craving any of those things, it's because there is some degree of blood sugar dysregulation already going on. If you get your blood sugar regulation balanced, most cravings will vanish. The root cause of most cravings is poor blood sugar handling. Number 16, chronic muscle tension. So this could be extreme tension in the upper back, extreme tension between the shoulder blades, extreme tension in the back of the neck or scalp, extreme tension in the lower back, very tight hips. Again, I test people. I've been doing that for 17 years. Vast majority of people have got loads of areas that are completely locked up and tight. One of the areas I see hugely tight, piriformis, and I call this muscle group the frightened out of the seat of my pants muscle group, and this is around the hips. So if you do a quick test and you cross one leg over the other, you should be able to get that knee lower than the other thigh. I don't know how well you can see me there. You should be able to get that knee right down, drop it right down below the leg it's resting on. That would be an optimal length of piriformis. There are many clients that have that can't even get the leg up on the knee, right? So a tight piriformis means you're frightened out of the seat of your pants, right? It's a physiological metaphor for what is going on. Now, Water retention or edema, another sign and symptom of being stressed. Being on the go constantly, not being able to simply do nothing. Feeling guilty if you are not busy all the time, because you always feel like, oh my god, I gotta do stuff. I gotta keep that over arousal going. I can't switch off. Sinus problems, example post-nasal drip, very, very common. Early morning waking before 5 a.m. In Chinese medicine, that is known as the triple heater, and that correlates very, very highly with the hypothalamic adrenal pituitary axis in Western medicine. So that early morning waking, if you wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, that's a sign that you're all ready. And I see that with a lot of my clients in the over 40 bracket. Bilateral weakness of the adductor or inner thigh muscles. When I'm testing people biomechanically, if I see that in a client, I know straight away they are very, very highly stressed, because all of the nervous system that serves all of the muscles in your body is the same nervous system that serves the internal organs and glands. And as far as the body is concerned, your internal organs and your glands are a higher priority in terms of survival than your limbs. God forbid you lost a limb. If you were patched up, you could live a long life. If you lost your liver, you would be dead in a very short period of time. So the nervous system prioritizes internal organ system health above and beyond muscular health. So a lot of people have got musculoskeletal issues, not because it's an isolated biomechanical problem, but because there's so much stress in their internal organs. And remember, stress affects those internal organs very, very much so. Now, 23, persistent or nagging injuries that just don't seem to respond to treatment. So remember, we're either in fight or flight mode, or we are in rest and digest mode. Now, that's not a completely definitive list. You know, as I said, I add to that list almost on a daily basis, but they're just signs and symptoms to let people know. Remember, being very, very stressed, for a lot of people, it's a subconscious way of being. This is their normal. Being stressed is the norm for most people, and because it's the norm, they can't see the wood for the trees. They've been living in this. This was my story. I was living in a highly stressed state for the vast majority of my life, and I was coping with it in the best way that I knew at the time, which was a lot of exercise, a lot of pushing myself at the gym, you know, above and beyond what was healthy for my body. Yes, I won medals and whatnot, you know, that was great up to a point, but it wasn't really a healthy solution as a long-term project. So first of all, in order to fix a problem, we must identify the problem. And what the coronavirus is doing now, the coronavirus is not really creating the problem per se. It is pointing to the problem that's already there. If people had healthy immune systems, coronavirus would not be a problem. If people didn't expect to fall apart as they age and decline, coronavirus would not be a problem. Now, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming anybody for getting older. Everybody is doing their absolute best based on the information that they have and based on the health of their nervous system. Remember, if you're super, super stressed and you're in this dorsal side of the vagus, you're shut down, you're frozen, you don't have the friggin' energy or the desire, you don't have the neurological apparatus to make friggin' change. You're going to need a lot of intervention and a lot of support to get out of that state. We're only going to have the motivation and the drive in healthier states of the nervous system and healthier states of the endocrine system. So what can you do right now that can start the process of unwinding that hyper arousal of this stress response? Well, I'll give you a few simple ideas. One of the simplest ways to calm down the nervous system that I have found that it's a no-brainer, it works for pretty much everybody and it's very easy, is stretching. Now, I recommend a specific type of stretching that I call yin stretching, and I got the idea from yin yoga, and it's basically to hold stretches for a long period of time, anywhere between 1 and 3 minutes. And what I will probably do before the week is out is I'll probably put together a little yin stretch routine. Now, when I was at the most critically stressed phases of my life, and I didn't have the energy or the motivation to, you know, do anything more robust, I just simply wasn't able, I would do the yin stretching, and I would make it so easy that all I had to do was lie on the ground and subtly move body parts around. Because when a person is highly, highly stressed, they don't have the frigging motivation to do stuff. It's not that they're lazy, it's not that they're lacking willpower, you don't have the neurological or endocrinological wherewithal to do it. It's got nothing to do with willpower. Your system has to be neurologically wired, and it has to be hormonally wired, and it has to be neurotransmitter wired to get this stuff done. So blaming yourself, once you start to see how this stuff works, you realize, holy shit, it's not that I'm lacking willpower, that I'm lazy. I just need to find a form of exercise that has the least, that will bring up the least amount of resistance in me, the least amount of fear in me. Because if you're in a super sympathetic state, doing a type of exercise that's extremely vigorous and stimulating you into even higher levels of sympathetic state is going to backfire in the long run. Ditto if you're in this dorsal vagus state, which is the most shut down state. You need very gentle exercise. So something like a yin stretch would be extremely powerful. And as I said, the way I do it is I try to make it so simple for people. Second recommendation would be breathing exercises. One of the breathing exercises, there's a gazillion breathing exercises out there today, but I just do something really simple. I ask people to breathe in through the nose for 5 seconds, through the nose, let the belly expand like a balloon, and exhale through the nose and melt the chest. Breathing in through the nose for 5 seconds. Exhaling through the nose and soften the chest. As you breathe in, really let that belly expand. Let your belly expand, let it blow up like a balloon. And as you exhale, let the chest soften like you're giving a big sigh of relief. Let that hand sink and let it sink. Sink. I call this one going from Dolly Parton to Kate Moss. Okay, breathing in, belly expands. Last third, there's my Dolly Parton, and I'm going to go back to Kate Moss. Exhale, relax the chest. Just letting that chest melt, because when we get stressed, we also get a lot of rigidity in the chest. We become very, very defensive. It's the mind's job to protect the heart. That's why the mind is a heat-seeking missile for problems. It's always trying to protect you from emotional trauma. So you can get quite rigid there. So if you practice that technique, I learned it in Pilates from actually the gyrotonic people, which is another amazing movement discipline, where when you exhale and you let your hand sink, 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 and you let it sink, and it's quite amazing. It'll do two things. Once you soften that breastbone, it dissipates and releases a huge amount of stress in the body. It's impossible to do that and have the shoulders uptight at the same time. It's just not possible. If you melt that chest, the shoulders will drift around the ears. Secondly, if you melt the chest and you really focus on that, you'll tend to do a much longer exhale. And if you manage to do your exhale even longer than your inhale, it's even more stimulating of the most positive aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is this ventral aspect of the vagus nerve. So you can either breathe in for 5 seconds and exhale for 5 seconds, or do something else like breathe in for 3 and breathe out for 6. You can play around with it. There is no wrong way to do those breathing exercises per se. I keep it very simple, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. There's a little bit kind of rhythm and harmony to that, but you can also play around with doing a longer exhalation. Now, people who are not used to doing breathing exercises find this extremely challenging. If I ask a client to do the breath in for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds, they'll be done at 1.5 seconds. Why? Because when you're stressed, your diaphragm becomes incredibly locked up, and most people are just living up here, and they're shallow chest breathers. They're accessory respiratory muscle breathers. So they absolutely have no idea how to breathe down into the belly. This must be practiced. You have to practice letting your belly expand like a balloon. And this will be very, very powerful. You must practice. One of the tips I give is imagine you're sipping the air with a straw. You're breathing in through your nose, but you're sipping it through a straw. You're not gulping it down. Don't try to get it all in at one go. Sip the air very, very slowly and just practice slowing it down. This will help you tremendously. Breathing is easy, it's free, you can do it anywhere, anytime. You can do it before you go to sleep at night, lying down on your back. You can do it sat upright with the hands on the tummy. You can do it lying down on your yoga mat with the hands on the tummy or the hands by your side. Just practice letting that belly expand. I'll even do it walking in the park. And I will get to the level where I'll practice getting the breath not only into my belly, but I'll practice bringing the breath all the way down to my pelvic floor. So I'm basically anchoring myself deeper and deeper down into the body. Remember, this dorsal vagus side of the parasympathetic nervous system is subdiaphragmatic. So all of the deep stress and trauma that we carry, we tend to bury it below the diaphragm. So if you can start getting that diaphragm exercised and getting it moving, it's going to release a lot of this dormant stress. And we want to get it out, folks. It's not helping you. You see, the more you hold on to the stress in your body, be it the traumatic memories or the unresolved emotions, you become a heat-seeking missile for every other person that also has unresolved trauma. You will attract these people into your life because the universe wants resolution on these issues. That's why this coronavirus is here. This is not an accident. The intelligence of the universe wants resolution of the fear, of the drama, of the trauma. The intelligence of the universe is urging us to move beyond a survival way of existing to a thrival way of existing. And the only way we're going to do this is to face our own demons of survival, to face our own fears, to face all of our unresolved grief, all of our unresolved sadness, all of our issues in our tissues that we have stored there. Everybody has them. As I say to my clients, nobody escapes the human condition. Nobody escapes it. Every person who has ever walked the earth has had these feelings. Nobody has it easy. I did a workshop not so long ago on family systems, and one of the things that we had to do was every single person had to discuss their own personal trauma and the trauma that individual members of their families had dealt with. And after having listened to about 20 people discuss the various traumas that they had in their lives, from a mother trying to sexually abuse her own son, making advances to her own son, to alcoholic parents beating the crap out of their children, to one child, the mother just decided to give her away to the grandparents who didn't want to have her. And the list went on and on and on. These were not unique freak people. Everybody, if they go deep into their lives, know that there is an unresolved trauma. And if they did not have any particular hard time, they might have had a parent who had a very, very challenging time. And that parent unwittingly can pass on the trauma. Nobody does this on purpose, folks. Everybody, I know in my heart, I know this deeply, that everybody in their heart is doing their absolute best. If we do not have the education, if we do not have the knowledge, if we do not have the resources, then how the hell are we going to get out of this stuff? It's deeply subconscious. But we're now living in a modern era where we absolutely can. We absolutely can. We have the resources, we can connect, we can share our knowledge, and we can practice these beautiful, simple exercises to let the trauma resolve and release. Now, Hannah Talbot, thank you for showing up. Hannah was one of my students in the European school many, many years ago. I think I had her for chemistry, and you're enjoying the breathing, and you're going to do that with your child. That is fantastic. So if anybody has any other questions, you can type them into the comments box. I'm going to give you a few other ideas of techniques that I have found to be absolutely no-brainers for dissipating stress. They work in every case. Now, another technique that I found when I was going through serious, when my body was starting to discharge the massive fear and anxiety that I had stored away. You see, fear is not the problem. If we feel the fear in the moment and we take the action that fear dictates we take because it's an intelligence, then the fear dissipates. But in many instances, we not only do we not fear the fear fully, we resist it because we are trying to protect our image. We don't want to look bad, we don't want to look stupid, we don't want to be humiliated, or we are trying to protect a very important attachment relationship, for example, the relationship with our parents. So that's one of the reasons why we don't want to feel the fear. Plus, we've had no training in how to feel the fear. right? So as the stuff starts to come out in my body, what I felt just physically was I would feel my body shaking and trembling. I was literally shaking for a whole year at one point, and my body temperature would drop. I would get shaky, all sorts of things. But the biggest one was I would literally feel my body trembling. Now, in the wild, if an antelope is being chased by a lion, and that antelope manages to escape, what they do is once they escape, they will stand and they will start to shake uncontrollably for a period of time. They will just completely shake. It'll just happen organically. They're not thinking about it. They will just shake and shake and shake. And what they are doing is they're dissipating all of the stress, all of the adrenaline surge, all of the hyper arousal of the nervous system. They are just dissipating it through a tremor type of response. Now, as human beings, if we were totally tuned in and intuitive, we would be doing the exact same thing. But number one, we don't understand that fear is a natural biological response and we resist the heck out of it. And number two, we don't want to look stupid. Because for human beings, humiliation or shame is even more difficult to handle than fear. So we would rather repress the fear and avoid feelings of humiliation or looking stupid. Nobody wants to look stupid. It's actually a bigger fear. The number one fear of a human being is not actually death. Death is number two. The number one fear of the human being is fear of public speaking. And what that boils down to is fear of being humiliated, shamed, or laughed at. Because this is part of our survival. If we don't fit and gel with our tribe, we ain't going to survive. So many layers to this. Once we understand how we're wired as human beings, we can get out of jail and help each other in the process. So what else will help you? The barefoot walking was the one that helped me dissipate huge amounts. As if when my body was just releasing and discharging the huge amounts of anxiety that I had stored up, I would go barefoot walking in the park. The people in the neighbourhood, they must think I'm absolutely nuts. The police were actually called. I was doing it at home in a field where I grew up as a child and played, and one of the neighbours called the cops. They thought I was a vagrant because I was doing barefoot walking. See, this is the world we're living in, folks, and that's the amount of fear that people have, that they would see somebody walking in a field and think that they were going to do something dangerous. Barefoot walking, extremely powerful. Now, if you're restricted in your movements due to this shutdown and you have a back garden, all you have to do is either walk around the garden in your back feet, and if that is too much, I had a client recently who said to me, Claire, I can't do the walking in the barefoot because my feet are terrible and it's creating some pain. I said, okay, all you're going to do is sit out in your back garden in a chair, and you're going to put your bare feet on the grass. Your bare feet, not stocking feet, not feet with shoes on, bare feet. You just sit, do your belly breathing, and let those feet contact with the earth. You are an electromagnetic entity. The earth is an electromagnetic entity. The earth is your mother. She's the real mother that you're looking for, because everything you need in terms of mothering and nurturing, more or less, you're going to find from the earth, or you're going to get a huge amount of it from there. You will discharge that excessive neurological tension and electromagnetic build-up, and if you do it with regularity, you are just going to absolutely love it. Talk about getting back to basics. It is so fundamental and so easy to do, and if you do it regularly, as I said, you will find a tremendous amount of support in that practice. So I've given you the breathing exercise to reduce stress, the recommendation to do stretching, the barefoot walking. I have many other examples in my book, Cracking the Mind-Body Code. Of course, one can meditate. Simply observing your breath is a form of meditation. There's lots of apps available nowadays like Calm, like Headspace, where you can get guided meditations. Some people resist the meditation because their head is already like super active and that they just find it too much. But what you will find is if you just do the belly breathing, or you do a nice stretching session, especially the yin stretching, you're going to be much more able to do any type of meditation technique after the stretching, or even after doing barefoot walking. So don't kind of write it off straight away. It might even be a sequencing issue. If you calm down that nervous system a lot by using a stretching technique or the barefoot walking technique, then the meditation will be easier. And don't expect yourself to start off, meditating for 20 minutes straight away. Maybe try 60 seconds. Make it easy for yourself. It's very, very worth it. because otherwise you become a prisoner of your mind. You become a prisoner of the thinking mind. And this is the mind that is conditioned and fearful and keeping, basically the mind that's going to do its damnedest to keep that trauma locked in place because it's so terrified of opening a Pandora's box. But once you gradually release it, it's going to be so much easier. And of course, if you've got major trauma in your life, getting proper counselling and support from a professional would be very, very important, because these things are best handled with support. As I said, if one has a particularly traumatic past, it's incredibly important to work with the right professional. The exercises I'm giving people are just basic techniques to dissipate the stress in a very, very simple, available ways, just to get people started. And that's what we want to do. When we are stressed, we don't want to start. We are locked down. We are overwhelmed. We don't know where to start. So pick the simplest possible thing you could do. Maybe it's belly breathing for 10 minutes. Breathing in through the nose for 5 seconds, breathing out for 5 seconds, letting the belly expand and melting and softening the chest on the exhale. Maybe you sit out in your back garden. It's springtime now, the sun's coming out. You put your feet on the grass and you just listen to the birds. You know, I love nature. There's another one of my all-time favorites for stress reduction, being out in nature. And if that's a possibility for you to get out in nature, even if it's just your back garden, take advantage of that. Now, does anybody, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. I could literally probably talk for 3 weeks without a break on this topic. And we'll all have a six-pack on the other side of it. I could go on and on and on because it's a topic very dear to my heart, because it literally has been, the unraveling of stress has been my life story, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. And as I said, we have a tremendous opportunity now with this coronavirus, is putting us in lockdown, putting us into an environment where we have time and space to start releasing out this stress. So before I go, what I would say to you is, what is the biggest fear that the coronavirus is bringing up for you? Because that is the one that's up for you now. What is the single biggest fear? Just be totally honest with yourself and just, tune into it, because this could be a massive doorway for change. What is that biggest fear? And then just do your belly breathing and just allow yourself to just let the awareness come up. What is the biggest fear? And using the tools and the simple techniques to start working on that process. So if anybody has any questions, you can type in the little chat box there, or any other any questions, any concerns, any suggestions of anything else you might like me to address in a follow-up call or broadcast, that would be fantastic. I hope you got plenty out of this today. As I said, I gave you a few simple tools: belly breathing, barefoot walking, being in nature, meditation. These are simple tools. Pick the one that's easiest. Pick the one that you're least resistant to, that feels like, oh my God, I could totally sit in the back garden with my bare feet on the ground. Make it easier for yourself, because then there's less resistance, and then there's a lot of reassurance. This is very reassuring for the nervous system, and very helpful. And yes, stretching. I forgot about the stretching. Now, before the week is out, I'll probably put together a little stretch routine that people can do and just calm their nervous systems down. Remember, stretching isn't just about getting better flexibility. Yes, it can help with that, but I have fallen in love with flexibility over the last several years because of its ability to dissipate and release that pent up, overstimulated nervous system. Incredibly powerful. You're going to feel so much better after it, and you will not regret it. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and I will look forward to seeing you again on my next broadcast. And I hope you all stay calm. Do some of the belly breathing maybe this evening. Maybe sit out in your garden and get those bare feet on the ground, and you will, every day you can build more resiliency, because remember, stress isn't all bad. We can learn how to harness it for the good. So the flip side of this coronavirus is this stressful situation that we've been put in can catapult us to new learnings, new ways of being, and we can develop what's known as a growth mindset. Nothing that happens to us is bad per se. It's just an opportunity for growth and expansion, and how to teach us how to learn how to live with less and less suffering and more harmony. So thank you so much for showing up today. I really appreciate it, and I want to wish you a fabulous rest of the day. Bye for now.